What is the easiest way to make $1 million? I hate to admit it, but I once fell for one of those work-from-home schemes that I saw in a classified ad. I sent them the $10 and they sent me back a piece of paper that told me to put ads in different newspapers telling people that for $10 you would teach them how they could make money from home, and when they send you $10, send them a photocopy of this piece of paper. I'm not too sure about other forms of currency, but the US banknotes are so ridiculously hard to replicate, that the process to do so correctly is insanely expensive, even to the point that other governments usually don't bother spending their time trying to replicate and print American dollars to crash the value of the dollar, except North Korea. There's actually a solid video by half as interesting about it. Either way, you'd spend more than $1 million to make good counterfeits worth $1 million. If you started investing $20 the month you were born every month, earning an average annualized return of 7%, you would be 82 years old by the time you had $1 million. Alternatively, you could do it at 40, but you'd need to contribute $381 a month from the month you were born. Interestingly, if you put away $1,920 a month every month from 20 to 40, you'd also have $1 million with the same average rate. You'd have $10 MN at 79. The easiest way to make $1 million is to deposit $5,000 into an SP 500 index fund and contribute $5,000 a year for the next 30 years, assuming historical interest rate. This is why literally any retirement plan, no matter how little you plan to contribute, will be life-changing once you retire. This is why compound interest is the most powerful force in the world. Since this got way too big, disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Principal, interest rates, and results may vary. Investing always comes with inherent risk. Do your own research before investing. Honestly, the quickest and more reliable way to do it for a normal person would be to throw every single penny you can into index funds, S&P 500, Roth IRAs, and your employer-matched 401k if you're lucky enough to have one. While even that's a gamble, it's the quickest and most reliable way to do it. Also, networking is the way to go if want to earn it faster. You have to be surrounded by people who have done it and/or can provide you with opportunities to capitalize on. I have friends who schmooze with the right people and make shit happen. It's weird the personality you need for that. It's a mix of always being on, having the right amount of Zion, and a firm understanding that those people aren't really your friends, but you have to act like they are for as long as you plan to be well connected. The super successful people I know don't only have a few friends. They have tons of friends that require constant tending to in superficial ways. Sort of like tending to a garden. That makes them sound sort of slimy, and many are, but many aren't. They just know the game. I've never fully tried this, but I've never had great luck forming relationships with wealthy and well-connected people for networking purposes. It's like I give off a pheromone where they know I shop for clothes at Marshall's and use coupons. You break into Tiffany's at midnight. Do you go for the vault? No, you go for the chandelier. It's priceless. As you're taking it down, a woman catches you. She tells you to stop. It's her father's business. She's Tiffany. You say no. You make love all night. In the morning, the cops come and you escape in one of their uniforms. You tell her to meet you in Mexico, but you go to Canada. You don't trust her. Besides, you like the cold. 30 years later, you get a postcard. You have a son and he's the chief of police. This is where the story gets interesting. You tell Tiffany to meet you in Paris by the Trocadero. She's been waiting for you all these years. She's never taken another lover. You don't care. You don't show up. You go to Berlin. That's where you stashed the chandelier. In the USA we have a thing called a 401k plan. I'm sure other countries probably have something similar. It's a retirement plan offered through your employer where a percentage of every paycheck is withdrawn, pre-tax, and set aside. Many employers match a percentage of contributions, which is free money. Once you're enrolled in the plan, you have to decide how your money will be invested. There's a lot of options and there's no one right answer, so you may want to talk to a financial advisor if you're not sure what to do. But it shouldn't be too hard to get at least a 10% rate of return. When you inevitably leave your employer for greener pastures, you won't be allowed to contribute to that account anymore. The money is still there and growing, but if you want to contribute to a 401k, then you'll have to enroll in your new employer's plan. What you can do, however, is roll over an old 401k into an IRA. You can contribute up to $6,000 per year to your IRA and the contributions are tax deductible. Assuming you work for 40 years and get a decent rate of return on your investments, you should have at least $1 million saved by the time you retire. And you'll have done it automatically with every paycheck. That's what I call easy. For easiest, this is the right answer. I'd just have to buy a ticket after work when I get gas today. A lot of the things people are listing would be really fucking hard. Marrying a rich person requires I convince a rich person to marry me. Then I have to be married to that person, and I probably don't want to do that. Panhandling for $1 sounds hard. I can't inherit $1 because my family is not rich. I guess some random person gifting me $1 for no reason would be easier than buying a lotto ticket. That's probably a few orders of magnitude less likely than winning the lotto though, but I guess it would technically be easier. 95% of these answers are jokes, but I'll answer seriously by saying what's worked for me in case anyone's looking for a serious answer. People suggest that you find something that you enjoy, something that you're good at, and something that you can make money from. That's a good vocational target. If you pick a growing, digital industry, then you can become an expert relatively quickly, then build a business around it. Digital businesses are great because they can scale so much easier than physical product businesses, e.g. an app can be distributed to 1 million people in an afternoon, whereas a gadget needs a sales and distribution network, plus you need to find the cash to manufacture it before you sell it. AI and blockchain are examples of growing digital sectors. Most big digital businesses have a mergers and acquisitions department that are on the lookout for businesses they could acquire to expand their offering and generate more revenue. The price they pay for a business varies, but 4 times revenue, not profit, is about right. If you're able to consistently show $250,000 per year in revenue, or even the promise of decent revenue, then it's not too hard to get to a $1 million valuation. Also, compound interest. Yeah, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with this. I've been freelance for 25 years doing high-end VFX work. I have a pretty good reputation and make decent money. Hiring interns to do the work would immediately negate both. No offense to any interns out there, but experience is a major factor in quality, value, and efficiency of work, all factors that lead to the good reputation. Now, that said, being a freelancer can lead to millions. If I were to leave/neglect my family and move into a van down by the river and live off of 10% of my income for a 15 years or so, I could accumulate $1 Sounds awesome. Similarly, if I were not to freelance, but to create a business doing the same thing, I could hire additional professionals to spread the work around, do great work, charge competitive rates, pay decent wages, work reasonable hours, and in just a few months to a couple years we'd all be out of work and broke because the VFX industry is spiraling into the ground. Not all businesses lead to riches. Best bet is create an online business, or an app, that solves a small problem for millions of people and sell it for 99 cents. 1. Live in country that has good paying jobs. 2. Join military to get access to college funds and home loans. 3. Get college degree. 4. Find good job with good retirement plan and decent pay. 5. Put away at least 20 to 30% of pay to savings and retirement. 6. Don't try to keep up with Joneses. 7. Marry spouse that followed 1 to 6. 8. Ensure one person in household is tied with money, while other is liberal. This creates good balance. 9. Work butt off to get good raises. 10. Give back to community. Living below means doesn't have to be unfulfilling. Giving to others can be as rewarding as an expensive car, but it builds goodwill and equity you can tap into. 11. Pray to God you don't get sick or lose job. Everyone makes $1 million. $1 million is 20 years working at $50,000 a year. 40 years at 25. The easiest way is just bopping around doing whatever you feel like. The easiest way to make $1 million fast is what all the top answers are giving you. Lottery. Marriage. Born rich. Get rich quick. Good luck. What you're really asking is what's the easiest, surefire way to have $1 million. The easiest, surefire way to have $1 million is to pursue a traditional formal education, to work hard, to associate with people smarter and harder working than yourself, to spend as little money as possible, to hone your social skills, to learn from your setbacks and keep your mission on your mind, to stay grounded when it comes to lust or love, to focus on avoiding unhealthy habits, and to discipline yourself to have a healthy daily routine. These things are way easier for people born smart, into the majority cultural/ethnic background in the most dominant and most stable countries, to emotionally kind, stable and wealthy, two-parent households with supportive extended families. But regardless of your initial situation, they're the easiest, surefire way to have $1 million. You might still fail, but at least all of that stuff maximizes your chances. If you want a serious answer, go get a degree in computer science. Work your ass off to get top marks. Typical starting salaries at the biggest tech companies are hitting around $150K/year for new grads. It only goes up from there. By 5 years in, $300K/year total comp is entirely attainable. Then live frugally, way below your means. Many of these companies are currently moving to entirely remote jobs, so you can live anywhere. Live somewhere cheap. Don't pick up any expensive habits, like drugs. Marry someone even more frugal than you. 4-year degree. 8 years working. Yeah, you could have $1 million in your bank account in under 12 years. It feels like a bubble since salaries are getting so high, and a ton of people are getting into CS for the money. I could imagine entry-level roles getting crazy competitive. But in general, I think software is still on the upswing and will continue eating the world. I also think the career is sufficiently hard that not everyone can do it well for a long period of time. Like maybe CS-PM gets saturated, but CS-distributed system seems a little safer lol. And maybe data science gets saturated but SWAY/ML jobs stay safe. That's what the market looks like now actually. Senior highly technical engineers that can pass the LC bar are impossible to find. And that's the demo whose salaries have totally skyrocketed. The thing about getting into CS for the money is that it's hard to be a good developer unless you love it. I was not a good student with good grades. I wasted my time programming IRC bots to run RPGs. I spent a lot of time writing code for fun. I don't do it as much now, but I absolutely did it back in the day. I know people who went into CS for the money, but they quickly burned out. Coding is rough if you don't actually like it. It's like how there are so many would-be authors but how many people finish a book. How many people hated cranking out essay after essay in college, and you want to be a professional writer with deadlines now. Entry roles are competitive, but you can differentiate yourself fast. And the number of jobs keeps expanding. The only thing I really fear is generalized intelligence that can understand client requirements and generate code as well as a person. but the day that happens the world will have changed so much we'll all be obsolete. I suspect this won't be true for much longer. For one, those scales typically are just based off of Silicon Valley cost of living. Major tech companies are either moving to Austin, Texas or are adopting a permanent WFH approach. Which means that you will probably see those numbers drop by at least a third over the next 3 years. If you already make $300,000 as a developer, then I suspect you won't see COL adjustments. For another thing, tuition is going up, so that will just be subtracted from your income for however long, unless you land some decent scholarships. Major tech companies are either moving to Austin, Texas. LOL, no, they're absolutely not. A bunch of them have offices in Austin, which is nice, but the Bay Area and to a lesser extent the other big metro areas are still very much the geographical heart of the tech industry. Every year there's a new wave of press about how big tech is moving to smaller city in some cheap state, and every year reality fails to live up to the hype because it turns out the kind of people those companies want to hire mostly don't want to live in Texas, or are adopting a permanent WFH approach. A few of the major tech companies are going to be offering more long-term remote options, which is great, but none of them are about to abandon their offices and some are already trying to herd people back into them. Which means that you will probably see those numbers drop by at least a third over the next 3 years. Very unlikely, unless of course the industry as a whole has an early 2000s-esque crash, which is always a possibility. But the expansion of remote work hasn't come close to satisfying the big tech companies' insatiable thirst for engineers, and I don't see any sign of that changing in the near future. I could be wrong of course, but I've been worrying about that shortage ending since I got into the industry in 2012 and so far none of my worries have been borne out in reality. Typical starting salaries at the biggest tech companies are hitting around $150K/year for new grads. I have a degree in computer science. And I've been in IT for 30 years. My son-in-law recently graduated with a CS degree and has maybe 18 months of experience. This number is unrealistic. Unless someone has personal connections that normal people don't have, like your father is owner or CIO of some large corporation, you're not going to see these numbers. A typical starting salary for someone with a CS degree is more like $50,000 to $60,000. You won't break $100,000 unless you're good and have maybe 6 years of experience. To break $150,000 without going into management, you're going to have to run a major project for large corporation. For every person who gets that high-paying job at Google or Apple, there are 1,000 people who are grateful to get the $50,000 job. To be clear, it's $100K minimum for React, in Chicago, for a developer who can pass the interviews. It's not a high bar, but about 50% of developers fail our questions, which, IMO, are not much harder than FizzBuzz. And we even let the developer take them home even though they can be done in an hour or two because not everyone does well under time pressure. Also, it's very hard to get your first job. It's very hard to get your first job because there are a lot of shitty developers out there who waste everyone's time in an interview, so once you have experience you come pre-vetted. Way back in the mid-aughts, I was working as a subcontractor for $20 an hour, trying to get experience. Now, I get cold called for interviews. Huge difference. I've seen developers with 5-year experience turn down a $135K offer because they got $150K elsewhere. It's a very well-paying field, and very well paying for the Silicon Valley big tech companies, but those are not easy to get into. I do hear you on having to use React because everyone else does it. I'd rather be using Ember, but popularity is a feature unto itself in terms of finding devs. As a recent CS grad who's been working for a couple of years now and has a lot of friends in the same field, I think the typical starting salary is closer to $60,000 to $70,000, outside of places like Silicon Valley, Seattle, etc. where they're much higher, but so is COL. I know a large number of people who took their first job at $70,000, worked for a year or two, and then left for jobs making $90,000 to $120,000 without moving to higher COL areas. $150,000 is definitely unrealistic as a starting salary outside of the cities I mentioned above, but $150,000 is certainly achievable just about anywhere within 5 years or so if you're willing to change companies. $300,000 seems very unrealistic anywhere outside of FANG, or entering into a CTO role or something.